Elouise, I wanted to almost dive straight in. Um, but before we dive straight in, one of my colleagues was talking to me, and he very much wanted me to ask this question about your current role. So could you explain your current role to me, like I'm a 5-year-old who almost doesn't understand anything?
Uh, my my current role is two parts.
Mm.
Half of my job is helping people understand the digital landscape. I'm not sure a 5-year-old, actually probably a 5-year-old would understand digital
I think
landscape.
they would.
Yeah, actually, probably more so than those of my generation. And then the other half is looking at the future and how the future will change what we do today, or can change what we do today. And so, what are the changes that we need to make? And so, in as I think about the future, I get to imagine what could be and what should be, and not be constrained by what is.
Yeah, it's a really nice position, right? To do this almost like blue sky thinking on steroids, is to have none of the constraints. And I've seen backlash whenever I post about things like that, and I'm doing this kind of futuristic view, and people are like, "Hey, no, that's impossible. We don't have this tech now." And I almost feel like people in the procurement space at times are very resistant to this kind of thinking, which I find very frustrating.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and so I'm not thinking about like random things about oh well, if we had driverless cars and hover planes and all of that. Although there are people that do that, and I find that very fascinating. My training's not in that, but I actually I look at questions, and so to your point about procurement, like we just assume that source to pay is the platform, like that is our digital platform. But if you actually stop and think, well, maybe that's not the right platform. And one of the posts I have coming up is like an architecture for procurement. I make the argument that we need one, and what does that look like? And it's not that it has to be so vastly different. In fact, I argue that it sits within the cloud platform, within the ERP construct, but we get to define what we need for procurement. And similarly for the supply chain, we're anchored into this idea that the ERP is the center of our systems. And so as a futurist, I get to ask the question, well, what if that wasn't the case? And more importantly, I get to make the argument that, hey, we need to move beyond the ERP. And that's I think where when I think future back, it's sort of taking some of these big things that don't work today and sort of reimagining how they could work.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a wonderful job you're doing, and actually your point around architecture there, it's just maybe over the last 2 months I've seen a new role just appear on my LinkedIn feed, which is wonderful, which is procurement architect. And and I've seen it a bit over maybe the last few years, but there was a few that I saw within a very short space of time, and I'm just thinking, are we just getting to that point now where maybe people are latching onto these ideas, that there is a bit more thought that needs to be put around this? And are we about to move away from the very traditional ERP source to pay way of working?
Well, there were 3 massive questions in there. Maybe let's try to work through those. I think, and I wrote this in my current book, historically, it's been half an FTE dedicated to managing the whatever technology contract, the whatever source to pay platform. But that's not digital. That's just managing a contract. To be digital, and I think this has become real, this is why you're seeing so many of these architect roles, is you have to understand what's going on in the market and be at the forefront. And oh, by the way, be plugged into this community of startups, of understanding and networking with your peers and understanding and exchanging information. I actually find, as an observer, the information that's shared when we bring various corporate entities together. Let me rephrase that. The digital architects we're talking about, we bring them together, and when we do that, the information that's exchanged it is truly like gold. And I hate to use that term, but so that very much is a role that's growing in importance, because the procurement function is growing in importance. And so you can't just have half an FTE sort of part-time managing a contract. You got to be at the forefront. And you see with the procurement garage at British Telecom, you can see with J&J, Roche, all these others that are out there talking about the SAM at Mars. They're not only at the forefront of it with their organizations, but they're helping cultivate and curate and be the face of many of these startups, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
But I will go ahead. You can respond to that, and then I'll come back.
I don't want to interrupt your flow there.
I was just
because you may cover.
Yeah, well, I think the other piece is implicit in that, in what goes unsaid, is that we are moving beyond the source to pay construct, and eventually we are moving beyond the ERP construct. So my current book is really about blowing up the source to pay paradigm, because if you really think about it, the procure to pay or the rec to pay part is important. We gotta get invoices, raise POs, pay people, pay suppliers. Great, do that. But this whole source to contract, intelligence, data management, like it kind of explodes after that. And even beyond that, we actually need to create intelligence. We need supplier intelligence. We need risk intelligence. We need ESG intelligence. And much of that is bespoke to every organization. So the idea that you would have one provider, one platform, you would have a platform, which is the argument I make, but one monolithic end-to-end provider that can do all of this, that not in today's corporate enterprise.
Can I just say that your use of the word monolithic, just perfect, because that has become my newfound, I just love that word so much there. Your vision, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, is effectively, you use the analogy of an iPhone or a smartphone, right? You've got multiple apps, you can click on them, data is usable throughout all of them, it's all synced up, it's all clean, it's all wonderful. How far do you think we're off truly seeing that? I'm really curious with your thoughts there, because I have a feeling that you're seeing a lot that other people aren't seeing in this space.
Yeah, so I would separate out. So to me, the platform consists arguably of four things. It consists of that user experience. I'll come back to that. It consists of the app store, the integration of all these complexities, the data foundation, which is in procurement's case, the supplier, or more broadly, the third party, and intelligence. And so intelligence is, again, something's going to be bespoke. We're going to build it, but you have to have clarity on who your suppliers are, and you have to have those golden records. So like somebody has to solve that. And then the app store is pretty self-explanatory. But until we get those three things, we can't really have that iPhone experience or the iPad experience. It just is. So it's coming, but it's slow because we have to get those other pieces right, or perhaps in tandem. And I think what I've come to realize, and yes, I do see things that I'm not able to talk about yet. That doesn't mean like in March you're going to see, oh my God, the vision come to pass. The vision will come to pass slowly over time, and we'll see it in incremental pieces. What I do see, though, is it's less about, okay, did somebody build that iPad view or whatnot, but more of maturity or evolution of the providers, because it has more to do with timing. And this is sort of a realization I had recently. The problem with the big providers is they're just entrenched in day to day. You have to make clients happy and you have to sell as much as you can. So no matter how much money you put towards innovation, no matter how many companies you acquire, you're not building this vision I'm talking about. And even the startups that have come about in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, they're on their own trajectories to getting to profitability and then exiting. So actually, and by the way, if that's their motivation's not building to my vision, to my blueprint.
Definitely not.
Their motivation, yeah, exactly. But their motivation is to, increase sales, which means tapping back a little bit into it's like they have to sell more. They have to deal with legacy issues. They have to integrate with ERP, with SAP or whatever ERP system. So they get stuck and they get mired down in the internal politics, the this, the that, the whatever. So very quickly their focus turns to, what do I need to do to get that sale, to get in advance of the exit? If you and I started created our own company today, we could largely step to the side of that and actually avoid the legacy entrenchment and sort of build to the future. Now, there's things we need in place, but if you're starting today, I actually think you have a better shot at sort of my vision, more so than anybody that's out in the market today. I think I danced around that.
No, it's good. No, I'm this is why I'm so excited to have you on here, because I just like listening to you when the way in which you talk when you're talking about these subjects. I can tell that you're thinking about it as you're talking. You're pulling all of this expertise, this research, all of the readings and conversations you have, and it sometimes sounds like you're almost having new thoughts all the time. And then that's kind of my observation. It may not be, but that's my observation of listening to you for a couple of years.
Thank you.
So I'm just cool listening.
Yeah, well, I mean, I talk to people every day. Right after this, I'm talking to a CPO. I do workshops all the time. I put these provocative ideas out there, and frequently I'll just test new ideas with unsuspecting audiences just to see how they react. And I'm deliberately provocative, and I poke them to see how they react. So I'm always testing, and yes, it's changing, and I very frequently will, note something down. So here I'm working on my new book, by the way, and one of the reasons why I was late to this or discombobulated is this morning is I got on this idea. So I was in a workshop a few weeks ago, and somebody told me, I was jabbing at them about contract lifecycle management, and somebody raises their hand and says, "We have 430,000 contracts in our system."
Oh, wow!
Oh my God, that's great! That's great. Okay, and then I'm just waiting. It's like, okay, and it got really uncomfortable. It was like, okay, so there's nothing else to be said. I guess we just got the 430,000 contracts and then we stopped. And to me, well, first of all, I want to know what's in those 430,000 contracts.
Yeah, me too.
Second of all, I want to know the cascade of. Yeah, exactly. Like the cascade of questions that follows from there. Like, that's what it means to be digital. And so that was just a random comment by a random person, but that has now become a section of my, a couple of paragraphs in my new book, because it's really exemplifies this problem of it's an exemplar of digital literacy in analytical inquiry. And so, so I'm constantly thinking about this and really having to figure that out.
Yeah, you've got my brain twirling, because I was just thinking there, like, I want to know, like, what the high risk clause is. How do you determine those high risk clauses? Who signed them off? Where's these risks split out? Like, what's the relationship like there on the contract side? where's the performance management of that contract? I don't know, Elouise, I don't know how much you know of my background, but like I'm a massive contract management nerd within the procurement space. That's kind of where my
I know that, which is why I thought you'd appreciate that.
Yes, yeah. I just, and for one, that sheer number. I mean, I've not worked in organizations outside of government that are big enough to have contracts like that, and that sheer number in the first place. I'm just thinking, like, I wonder what. I'm just excited by what they could do with that.
Right, you have the same reaction. Yeah, you have the same reaction I do, and that's my point. That's what it means to be digital, to really go after that, and I want to know how many of those are active. I mean, maybe only 10,000, right? Like that's just the fun. Like there are so many, and I tell so that story. Yeah, exactly, because it should draw, like, the intellectual curiosity should draw us into that. And so then I ask the question, why is nobody in that room asking the questions, the reaction you and I are having? Why is nobody else in that room having that? And so, yeah, no, I'm constantly being influenced by the interaction. I mean, I have tons of interactions like that. And some of them are just a lot of the same, like, oh, how do I fix my supplier data, or how do I do this? But there are then these moments that just like spin new things that need new topics that need addressing.
Yeah, I really I'm so happy you brought that up, because it's been a while since I've been in the contract management space as a practitioner now. It's almost a year out, and just it's good to stay close to it. I'm just trying to think of how to ask this question nicely.
With me, I think by now you know that you can be as blunt as you need to be, because I will correspondingly match.
Yeah. I think what are the biggest issues you have with current tech providers? And I'm asking this as well, being a tech provider in the space, right? Like I almost feel like we could get shot down, I'm giving you freedom here to shoot everyone down in the space, and you've kind of touched on some of them, right? Like just now, in that, if we made a company today, they would align better to your vision than companies made probably over the last 5 to 10 years, and especially pre-pandemic. Yep. Is there anything else that you think procurement tech, contract management technology, we can go as wide as we want here with that definition. Is there anything that they're getting wrong time and time again?
Well, I think there's two things, and I'm not going to miss an opportunity to drag big ERP, but like I got interviewed for an article some time ago, and they would ask me to like play out 50 years, and I could not let go. I said, if we do not get rid of the ERP, we will never get to any future. Like they wanted the flying cars and the jetpacks and whatever else, and I was like, look, we had to get rid, like we had to ditch
just get rid of the ERP.
And actually, right, that's the big thing, and so this is probably not to the tech providers. This is to the heads of supply chain and CIOs. And I have a chapter in my new book that is, we are living in a post-ERP world. We just haven't accepted it yet. And so I really just take aim at, let's just say, that audience, and really like thump them over the head repeatedly, because that's what's holding us back. And this legacy thinking that the ERP is the thing. It's not. And so that's one. And then the other one is just like, well, actually, I'll make 2 points that are related. Like AI or data is the new oil, or like it's going to be AI. All I hear is AI, machine learning, AI. Oh my God!
Everywhere.
And actually, as a sub point to this, I'll see if I can keep all this threaded together. The question clients ask me the most is about blockchain, and I just tell them it's nonsense, and they're just, the relief just comes over them. So like anybody that has blockchain, I stop listening to them, and then I roll up the newspaper to swat them away. But to go back, so like this AI nonsense, That's every startup does this. Every tech company does this. First of all, the clients don't understand it. Second of all, certainly the sales reps don't understand it, and it's irrelevant. And so, okay, my assumption is you have all that under the covers. Good, go do that.
We don't need to know about it, right?
Right, exactly. And then the other part is, and I don't know. So I saw this on LinkedIn and I didn't capture it. So, but right now we're getting the big Chat GPT. It's out there everywhere. And how's it going to change procurement? Like we're asking the wrong question. This quote was, "You're not going to lose your job to Chat GPT. You're going to lose your job to the person
someone using
that
it.
figures." Yeah, exactly. Figures out how to use it better than you. And so hopefully anybody listening to this, if they know where that quote was, please let me know. Because that's really it's applying these concepts to what we do. And so we have to improve our literacy and our understanding of this stuff. So the tech companies coming in and just wah, 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 it doesn't help. So.
No, it's a really
like. Yeah.
No, the AI point's super interesting, right? Like we have an internal channel where we talk about AI, but we don't talk about it outwardly very often because, hardly anyone understands. You start talking, and I think I listened to something with you and Sarah Scudderer, and you were talking about your very deep machine learning expertise, your understanding is the research, and I followed a few of those and just got completely lost, if I'm being honest, in that. I was like, oh, this is going to require a dedicated amount of learning to truly understand how this all pulls together, because it's not just one layer. There's a web of things. And procurement pros, maybe legal pros, contract management pros, they just don't necessarily care about this. They just want to know, how's this going to get me from A to B and do it in the most efficient way possible. So no, that's a really good, yes, I'm glad that I asked that question.
Yeah, and so I spend a lot of time in my new book on this question because, and to your previous point about I'm always churning on these ideas, the fact that I just get pummeled by AI, even by my colleagues, and it's just at a certain point, it's does anybody really know what you're talking about? You're just yeah, it's just can we just stop and just what are we trying to get at, and understanding, because AI is not a magic button. There are no magic buttons in technology, and so we have to really appreciate the nuance. And oh, by the way, all these algorithms are fed by data. Well, guess what you just told me not you, but I just found out that every organization has terrible data. So right, exactly. So don't be talking about AI if we're not having a conversation about data.
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? When I was implementing Gatekeeper, I'll save you the story, but I did a sourcing exercise, chose Gatekeeper, and then looked at the implementation, and then started going through our data, which I already knew was awful, right? That's part of the reason I wanted somewhere to put data. We had it coming from 1,000,001 sources, and then I was like, oh, our data is so much worse than I could have possibly imagined as soon as I started extracting it out of all of the tools. And that set me back 2 months, just that one point of just having to relentlessly clean it up. I had an intern with me that helped out, and I had an outsourced partner that helped me out clean things up. But it just shows, right? You can't do anything with horrendous data, or even if it's just got a few missing points, you'll lose the story. And going on to AI, right? It's worthless without that.
Exactly. So what's the point? Quit. And true AI, the Chat GPT and these transformational models, or these transformer models, is you need vast amounts of data, bigger than right. You don't need one enterprise. Yeah, exactly. Come on, we're not this is the scale is so out of whack, And then the question that I have, of course, like any good researcher, is, well, where's the bias, and what's missing from the data set? Because, and this is true. The other thing that drives me crazy is all these web scraping companies that do like scour the internet for everything, more so in risk and ESG. It's like, well, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad you've consumed all that information, but what are you not consuming? Because the greatest risks to the enterprise come from the places where there's no data being generated or no digital data. So that's that drives me crazy too.
Yeah, the bias point's really interesting. I've been playing around with these generative AI tools, especially Midjourney, to make images for like creative stuff. And one thing I've noticed time and time again, it makes everyone white, and it makes everyone
Exactly.
like I put any instruction in, and it's always male, and I have to ask it to make females versions of whatever I'm doing. It's just little things like that, and you add, I just wonder how. Like you say, how do you remove that bias, or how do you have some sort of cleansing of that? It's super interesting to think about. You mentioned risk there, and I'm going to use that as a segue here, because I really wanted to talk to you and get some of your thoughts around, and I'm reading here because I'm going to butcher it otherwise. In your book, you talk about a strategy or a framework, signal, strategy, and action framework, and how teams could utilize that. And my thoughts are, I have a lot of conversations, and people are actually talking about risk management more than I've ever heard them talk about it. It's kind of wonderful. Could you give like maybe an overview or your thoughts around that framework?
Would it be okay if I admitted that I've expanded that framework in my new book? Because
that's awesome. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's well, because for two reasons. Well, maybe three reasons. One, I actually think, I'm glad, like, everybody is talking about risk management and resiliency. So that's good. Like, we're really having these conversations. But I also think that we need to even expand and go deeper, and frameworks like mine, and there's a gazillion frameworks out there. It's less about the framework, although I have an expanded framework.
A new framework.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't negate what I've talked about there, but there's more to do. And, but I think the problems, the opportunities with risk management get back to the data. And I don't care if you have the best framework in the world, whether it's mine or somebody else's. If you don't know who your suppliers are, then you are not doing risk management. And if you have 30,000 suppliers or more, you are not doing risk management. You are doing what I now term risk theater. And so we have to, like, it doesn't matter what the framework is. We have to actually get good at the fundamentals of the design of our information, of our intelligence. And that's a little bit where I made a slight pivot, because I realized nobody cares about the framework. We need to sort of look at, everybody needs to be looking at who are the suppliers, and have we designed for simplicity, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I'm glad I asked that question. I
would really like to answer that question after my new book comes out.
No, that's great.
Because
we can do that.
That's why I was laughing.
I'm glad I asked it because no, I appreciate you can't answer that. I'm glad that you're evolving it as well. I thought there were some cool insights there. Do you know what
it's not anything that's bad. I didn't say anything that's wrong, and I also wouldn't say that no risk management provider has done anything wrong. No other consulting, it's just we're looking at the wrong level. We need to actually go ground, like, bottoms up, because until we actually, what I realized is great framework, but it's the reality on the ground that's we're getting tripped up on the basics, and that doesn't mean just go buy a tool. In fact, the tools are creating chaos too, because again, we don't have the right tools. And then the other thing that drives me crazy is we're putting the huge burden on the suppliers. Go fill out this. Go fill out this survey. Go fill out that survey. Survey. So we need to move beyond that. And so I sort of looked at all of these problems together and decided, okay, let's just set that aside. That I assume all these tools are great. I assume the frameworks are great, but actually let's look at it from let's do the build up from the bottom.
Yeah, no, it's a cool point. Like maybe I'll share an observation that I've had over. I'm trying to stretch, maybe let's just say 7 years, because that's all that is my working career in procurement contract management. My biggest challenges with people I've worked with and the teams that I've had is like, when do we actually even identify that there's a risk? Because we may have these questionnaires that are out, or we may have this external data feed that pulls information, but every day in conversations that we're having, we're identifying new risks or new issues or new problem scenarios. And I would have conversations with people after they've had these calls or these meetings or these site visits. And I'm like, well, what are you doing with that? Oh, nothing.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's almost like, why? That's literally that is, to me, that's the magic. That's that is everything that we need, and it's probably better than anything we'll get elsewhere. It's from the source. It's just come out in natural conversation. We need to be tracking all of this and working to mitigate it, or work around it, or going back to them on these points, because they could come back and really hurt us. Or maybe they're not overly sinister, right? But there's just cool information that allows us to build up a better picture of our suppliers and the contracts. This is one observation that I've had over 7 years.
Yeah, what do you do about it? I mean, we just talked about bias in AI, but I guarantee you neither of us are going to take tangible steps to solve it today. And if you look at some of these resiliency sort of plans, and like the first recommendation is always, well, don't single source. No kidding.
Yeah.
Really? Like that, back to your 5-year-old knows that better than like that's not like that's the recommendation. Like we're not single sourcing because we're stupid. We're single sourcing because the supply market in that region doesn't facilitate, and so maybe the question we have to ask is how do we build a bigger supply market? And it's not identifying, because if we haven't identified and there's another legitimate supplier, fine, then we're not doing our job. But I assume that everybody's doing their job. The assumption is everyone's doing it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if they're not, then fire them and move on. But if there's only a single source, then how do you invest in, build, create an additional capacity? And those are big problems, and they take time.
Yeah.
So just saying,
don't
single source is like, and that's the part that gets mixed up in here. And the other piece I wanted to point out is, you send out all these surveys. Well, is anybody really looking at the data that comes back? And even if they were, yeah, exactly. It's a colossal tick box exercise. And even the suppliers, we assume that they understand half of this stuff, and they understand how the question is. I mean, I think that suppliers legitimately, they're not fraudulent, but like, I know that when I respond to RFPs, I don't understand some of the questions, and if I don't understand it, like, how can other people do it? So, like, what's the quality of the data you're getting back? That doesn't make you any safer than doing or not doing the survey.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? And the whole approach to asking questions on forums, like I've seen it as a colossal time waste and tick box exercise. Some of the questions are very well merited. Most of them aren't, and they're just used to satisfy someone else somewhere. And if you're not using the data that you get from it, just don't ask it.
Right.
It's that simple to me. But I've I've had a lot of issues in the past with this line of reasoning with colleagues and superiors, let's say, at times.
Yeah, but you have to ask their what's their motivation for doing that? Because it's not. And again, this is the question about when it comes to risk management. Are we trying to defend our organization, or are we trying to defend internal politics? And I think once you get to that question, then you can really have an answer. And I mean, the greatest risk to your organ, I'm trying not to like drag a few of my clients, but that's why I just paused. Like the greatest risk to your organization comes through your third parties. So you have to really look at how you're managing your third parties, and asking them a risk questionnaire doesn't help you get more secure. So how do we create that, the defense posture? And that's really what I'm looking at now, so that we can have the conversation and point out how utterly stupid it is to say, well, they filled out the survey. Well, I have a client that's been hacked and customer data exposed 8 times. So, like, quit telling me about these surveys. So anyway,
no, it's super interesting. I had that exact scenario happen to one of my key suppliers, right? Like maybe Christmas time 2021, got hacked. Wasn't sure if they exposed a bunch of our confidential contractual data. They didn't, but like what was interesting is like we were able to actually use some of the data we collected from them, and we were able to completely shut them off, close them off our network, and just the way we got them back on, which was fortunate for them to even be allowed back on to our network, it took time, but we were able to do it, and we knew effectively that we hadn't been exposed. The risk was as reduced as we could do at our end. But you're right. But if we just go,
if you would have designed, assuming you should have not you should have, but if you design assuming that they're going to get hacked, then you wouldn't have to go back to the survey to figure it out, because you would already know that you're protected. And that's the change that I want to get to. Like, you shouldn't have to go look at the survey to figure out what your exposure is. You should know it because you've designed your defense posture in that way.
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? Like, you'll get me thinking here, because it's almost like steps of maturity, right? As well, it's like when I almost feel like when you're getting to that point, that's like the next layer above what I've just mentioned, right? It's like, oh, we've designed everything now. We've freed up enough time that we can actually spend some brain power here to think about actually for these, X number of vital suppliers, how are we going to design our contingency strategy should this happen, and build from the outset. So I'm just thinking here, it's like, how do you do that contractually with them as well? Like that would require some changes there potentially around the standard structure of some contracts to enable that to happen. It's a good thought exercise. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, yeah, because that's how we protect ourselves, not by sending out a survey. And the other part is you said is something important. Your top suppliers, because let's just say you had 30,000 suppliers. Guess what? You are not securing yourself from 30,000 suppliers. So if ever there was a case for segmentation, obviously, which I know in procurement we do based on value and volume and other sort of factors, but like, you are not managing 30,000 suppliers. I argue you will barely manage 1,000 suppliers. So if even just in that sort of, like, you have to take the top 100 at the enterprise level and give them the treatment you were just sort of visualizing, and then the other 900 we have to do something which is slightly less, because but we have to again design what they can and cannot do. And then the other 29,000, you get them out of your systems, because they should not be anywhere near your corporate systems.
Yeah, it's true, right? Like, I'm glad I asked that question because we've put out a lot of good stuff there. Like that was really cool to go through that thought exercise. I'm super conscious of time, but there's two questions I want to kind of finish this off with. Firstly, what's one piece of tech you can't live without, Elouise?
Oh my God. Well, besides, I'll assume you don't mean my iPhone, iPad, or Apple Watch.
Let's get rid of those, because everyone is saying that, and I'm with you. Like, for me, it's yeah.
I'll actually give you a few because they're all sort of interrelated. So probably the biggest one is, well, I'll add to that list that you're just going to put it, but I actually use LinkedIn and I use YouTube a lot. And
yeah, me too.
So I can't really live without those two because I actually do a lot of learning. So sidebar, but I try to read 30 minutes every day, write 30 minutes every day, and watch videos that are related to my research for 30 minutes every day. So YouTube is one leg of that. And so that's, and I would add Audible in there too.
Audible. Wow, I love that.
So all of those are like my de facto. But the one tool that, I think in the question you're probably asking, I like Airtable, which is sort of an online spreadsheet. And I can't live without, because I do all my activity tracking. I do all my public speaking tracking in there, and it just speaks to me because it's very visual, and I like it.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I've had a few people come to me with Airtable. I'm a massive Notion user. Like I've built a second brain in there. I just absolutely love it, and I track everything. But Airtable.
And then, can I add one? I got to add.
Yeah, go.
I just 2 weeks ago learned about Scrivener, which is for writers, and it's a great way to organize your thoughts. So I'm now addicted to that. So Scrivener, there's your second one.
I'm going to check that out. I'm going to send you some recommendations as well after this episode, after our recording. I won't bore you with them now, but they might be cool. We've kind of covered this question, but I'm going to ask it just in case you want to offer up anything else other than death to the ERP, which can be your wish here. But I'm a procurement genie. You've got just one wish. What is that wish?
Oh golly! My one wish is that it's two sides of the same coin. Is that we as procurement understand our value to the organization and we embrace it full throttle, because procurement is viewed in such deficit terms within the organization, within the tech companies, everybody, consultants, always talking about how procurement can't do this, shouldn't do that. There's a lot of judgment of procurement. And so my one wish is that we transcend all of that and really embrace, the greatness that we are. Think about the conversation we had about contracts. Like that's so much fun, and that's something you only happen with. We're not going to have that conversation with anybody else in the organization. And so I think that's or risk management. Like many of the conversations, it's emblematic of how cool procurement is, but I don't think as practitioners we embrace it, and then there's all these detractors within our community. So that's my wish.
Great. No, it's a nice wish. Thanks so much for jumping on this podcast today and just nerding out with me. It's been super fun. I really appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.